Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us here for our September 3rd Tuesday at 3 webcast series event. Today's topic is in sort of the subheading cloud cover, managing it all, of course, it being IT. I'm Alan Falcon, CEO and pragmatic evangelist here at Cumulus Global. I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day and week to join us here, either attending live or if you're viewing this on demand as well. We appreciate you joining us here. Before we get into the meat of the session, a couple of things. You'll notice the audio is muted. This prevents any background noise from getting in the way. So please, if at any time you have a question, the best way to reach me is along the top or right-hand side of your screen. There's some icons. One of them opens a questions window. I'll get notified of the questions. I can track to make sure we get them all answered before we leave here today. The session is also being recorded as always. We get these posted typically within 24 hours. We'll send you an email with a link to the on-demand session as well. And feel free to share that with colleagues if you think it might be of value to them. Our 3 webcast series is one of many resources we maintain in our resource center. As always, please feel free to visit the website and take advantage of those resources at any time. And so a couple of things, simple agenda today. We would talk about a model for IT management and strategies going forward, and a particular focus on managed services and managed cloud services. And so we talk about managing it all. What are we talking about? We're really talking about 5 things. And the acronym we like to use now is SPARK for security, performance, availability, reliability, and cost. And I know that, historically in enterprise IT, there was always talk about, performance, availability, reliability, making sure systems are on par. But for our small and mid-sized business customers and government agencies and K-12 systems that we work with, security is paramount in today's world and will be for the foreseeable future. And of course, we want to keep a sharp eye on cost, because cost is part of that value proposition and that value equation that really lets you know if the decision and the direction you're heading with your IT services is right for you. And so if we dive a little deeper, what do we mean when we talk about security? And so the next level down, we won't go into all the aspects of security, but just to give a feel for it, it's really a broad range of services that you need to have in place. Identity and access management, usernames, passwords, physical device access and control for many organizations, regulatory and industry compliance, whether you take credit cards and need to be PCI compliant as an industry standard, or you deal with protected health information and have to be HIPAA compliant, or you're a business partner and need a partnership agreement and coverage for an organization that's HIPAA compliant. Those all come into play. Certainly, we think of Security Day, we think of spam and virus protection and a particular focus on preventing ransomware and other forms of malware. But there's also data loss prevention, and this is both from breaches and other disclosures, be they intentional or accidental. And the difference in terminology here I'm looking at is breaches is an external effort to get your data. A disclosure is a release of data or data loss that happens due to an internal action. And as we've seen over the last couple of years, it's not uncommon for employees to make mistakes or do things maliciously that cause data to leak from their organizations or to have that type of event and have to worry about data loss. Preventing that. And finally, in security, we talk about information privacy. And this is really who has access to what information needs to be kept private, who is a need to know, and how you manage it. And so even under security, we might, talk about privileged access management so that even system administrators only have unfettered access at specific times for specific tasks, or at least when they do, it's logged and their activity is tracked to make sure there's no accidental or intentional damage there. We hop into performance, and a lot of people really say, oh, performance is how fast is the system. And yes, responsiveness is a key. But we also look at performance as time to work, right? How long does it take to start up, connect, log in, and be ready to do your job? And how often do you have to do that? Particularly even reconnect and log in, particularly with remote workers now, people working from home. Timeouts on systems for security means you might be logging into systems multiple times a day. We also like to include in the definition of performance the ease of use. How easy is this for your employees and your team members to use to do their daily work? How well does it support the workflows? Does it help or does it hinder? Is the technology extra steps or is it reducing steps and making things more efficient? all of that comes into play with performance of your IT environment. When we talk about availability, yep, uptime versus downtime, that's great. It's an important component, but availability is also access, whether it's to systems, applications, specific features and functions that might vary based on people's roles within the company, as well as the data, either unstructured or structured. Separate file systems could be data, as well as data within those other applications and systems, all have to be managed. And so availability isn't just, hey, is it up and running? Am I able to do my work? Can I log in? It's, do you have the access you need? And more importantly, are you restricted from the access you don't need for security purposes and for access management purposes throughout your environment? And that leads into, access is sort of the front end. It's permissions management. And here we get into availability with respect to compliance, industry standards, corporate policy or company policy, as well as availability and permissions management for your administrators and your super users and how they access the system, when and why. Reliability, most people think about it in terms of uptime and impact. What's the frequency of disruption or the number of errors you might run into in your environment? And again, here, studies done way back, in ancient times in the 1990s show that, you could have, two environments, both with, the same level of availability, but, 6 10-minute interruptions is worse than 1 hour long, disruption, because of the context switching and the chain, the impact, the response to the disruption, getting back to work, getting refocused, the up and down is there. So, yep, uptime and impact is still a consideration with reliability as a traditional mechanism, but we look at other things as well when we look at reliability. And one is, are your systems properly maintained? Are they getting the patches and the updates in a timely and organized manner? If any of those updates could pose a risk, are they tested before they're deployed? That's, maintenance and, the preventative side, the preventative maintenance side of ensuring your environment stays reliable. And in between, some acronyms, RTO, return to operations. Should something happen and there be a disruption, how quickly could you return to normal operations, right? And that's different than time to recover. So, return to operations is how quickly can you get up and running and operating. Time to recover is a longer time frame. It's what would it take once you're up and running to make sure all your data is restored, there's been no data loss, the system's operating properly, everything is properly secured. There's more involved in time to recover than there is in return to operations. Return to operations is minimizing the time that you can't function as a business in your critical areas. Time to recover, that recovery is the full scope, back to normal, data's recovered, missing information's been filled in, et cetera, et cetera. Your processes are complete. And so within that reliability comes business continuity and disaster recovery, the ability to get data back if it's lost, or to continue to operate the business if your primary systems become unavailable due to natural, man-made, or other type of disaster. And within the reliability, we also bundle in data integrity. Is the data accurate? Is it meaningful? Is it what you expect? Is it being collected properly? Is it being managed and maintained properly? Because again, you could have a system that never goes down, is always up. If there is a glitch, you're operating in minutes and your recovery is short. But if the data is incorrect, it doesn't really matter if the rest of it is working smoothly. So for us, data integrity is a key part of reliability as well. And finally, there's that cost. And we definitely think of cost, in the total cost of ownership model, from acquisition through the entire life cycle to disposition and refresh. And that's great. But we also look at costs with some different lenses, right? And really, what lens is right for you depends on how you manage your business, not only operationally, but from a financial management standpoint, right? So if you measure your business success on, gross operating margin, we've worked with businesses that look at return on equity or return on investment as other metrics. How you measure financially the success and health of your business comes into play. How you manage your financial operations on a month-to-month, quarter-to-quarter basis come into play. So when we look at cost and we look at managing costs, it's managing costs within the context of the way you run your business. And so There's a discussion about capital expenditure versus operating expense, and which is, how do you want to spend your money, and which is best for you and how you measure your company's success, or adequately allocate costs, things of that nature. We look at fixed versus variable costs, because even in the services we provide, there are often costs that are fixed, that are set, regardless of your utilization or the scope of use. And there's others that will vary based on the utilization itself. So, for example, the number of Google Workspace or Microsoft 365 licenses is generally variable with the number of people working in your organization who need an email address or access to other, the other services within those productivity suites. A fixed cost that doesn't directly scale with headcount is the network infrastructure, right? And your switches and your wiring and your routers, things of that nature, which has to be in place in that environment, whether you have 10 people or 50 or 100. The other way we look at cost in the other lens is it strategical or tactical? And sometimes we'll even say, is it strategic, is it tactical, or is it opportunistic, right? There's that third option out there as well. And the reason we look at it that way, because there are times where you incur a cost, long term it's not strategic to your organization, but it's a tactical way. It's spending money in a tactical way to solve a near-term problem without making a long-term issue worse or creating new challenges in the long term. And there are other times where your spending is more strategic, where the impact isn't expected immediately, or is expected to be delivered over a longer period of time, a more strategic time frame, or even build over time in value as you go through. And all of these considerations come into play in understanding how and when and why you're taking on costs or cutting costs, how that reflects how you manage the business, and how it relates to your business goals and objectives is key. All of these are involved in managing it all. So when we look at the perspective of IT management, a little bit of history here about centralization, because really that's where the decisions are being made, and excuse me, and how things progress. And certainly early on in modern IT, everything was centralized on mainframes. We evolved into mini computers and local area networks. Large corporations tried to re-centralize PC LAN and management and started setting up operation centers and help desks. Then came distributed computer and client-server computing that sort of pushed things back out into business units and departments. Then virtualization was centralization. Early cloud was highly centralized and controlled. Now we're in maturing cloud. I sort of say it's central. I can argue that as well, because we see not only the executive team or the IT department making decisions on what cloud services to buy, we see line of businesses, right? Line of business departments and functions making decisions. So the marketing team will decide which cloud-based marketing tools they want to use. Even though IT may be selecting the productivity suite and standardizing on certain databases, it all comes together. It's a lot more flexible. And that's important because there's also, in parallel, an evolution of IT services. And back in the 70s and early 80s, it was still pretty DIY, right? If you were beyond the mainframe, even in large enterprises, few, if any, folks in mini and microcomputers and smaller computing platforms. And certainly if you were a small business, resources to help you deploy and use technology were few and far between. Really from the 80s forward, we had this break, this build it, hey, I'll set up your computers. I'll maybe even put them on a network, get a printer going. You'll use it. And periodically we'll get update disks from the vendors. We'll come in and apply those. And if something breaks, pay us, we'll come out and fix it. We'll leave you a work order receipt, not much different than your plumber, and you'll pay for our time and effort to fix things that are broken, right? And that was really CapEx heavy with, sometimes support contracts, but responding to problems, time and materials, or maybe even prepaid hours just to save a couple of bucks. Earlier this century, we started to see the evolution of managed services, and this is still evolving. It's still the dominant model. It really should be zeros to 20s or even zeros to 30s. Here, you're still historically focused on physical deployment of servers and network infrastructure and workstations, laptops, oftentimes with a periodic on-site component from your managed service provider who's handling the updates and distribution of software and imaging. So you're still in this CapEx model of acquisition of things, followed by monthly fees for that ongoing support. And oftentimes per X pricing, we'll delve into that a little bit more in the session, where you're starting to charge based on consumption, but it's physical, tangible things. Today, when we think about our model in managed cloud services, it's not, yes, there might be physical components, but it's really about deploying a service. We're deploying IT services, generally around the software, the capability, the applications and systems you're going to use. The hardware becomes the access tool. It's a client device. It's not the center of the universe, right? There's pricing is, tied to service level agreements and consumption, how much you need, and measured in different ways. There's a preference to have this be operating expense over capital expenditure. And in most areas of your IT shop, you can scale the cost with the usage of that, of each particular type of service. And we'll see that play out a little bit more as we go forward. And management of IT, well, looking back at sort of the traditional architecture when we first started having networks, if you will, and off the mainframe, people would have a pretty significant server mix, right? You had your domain servers, you needed a primary and a secondary. You might, if you have people working remotely, need a VPN with terminal servers. You would have application servers backed by database servers. You would need servers to do your file and system backup and restore, even if it was on-site to tape or on-site to off-site. And of course, you had your file servers and your email server. On top of that, in your local network environment with printers, et cetera, you got your clients, your desktops, your laptops. And a lot of people took that model, and it was good. And obviously, the complexity varies with the size of the business. And with the evolution of virtualization, you might not have 6 physical servers. You might have 1 or 2 physical servers and 4 to 6 logical virtual machines running on those, but still the same components. And as things moved into the cloud and sort of where we've hit, which is core cloud, sort of the easiest things to get moved first, right? So email services were some of the first to move into the cloud for small, mid-sized businesses. File services were next. Backup and restore, great to have cloud-based solutions there. Solves the problem of, you don't have to transport tapes off-site anymore. You back up, you might have a local copy, but everything's instantly off-site as well. Some advantages there. Looking forward and cloud forward, we sort of changed the model, right? You still have on-premise components, but it's not all the different types of servers, right? You still need your firewall router, switches, your wireless infrastructure, and user devices, so we'll call those clients and printers, things of that nature. And you may, depending on your business, have systems that require physical proximity, right? So a manufacturing firm, servers controlling the manufacturing line probably need to be on site on a segregated secure network. That's fine. We don't expect to necessarily pull those out in most cases. In some instances, it's possible, but generally not. We get that. You're still going to have some on-premise. What becomes cloud resident, though, it becomes your identity and access management. It's a service now. It's not a physical set of servers. If you've got local applications that are running on, database and application servers you've moved into the cloud, you might need virtual desktop or remote desktop. In fact, for many organizations, that's becoming the default because it provides ubiquitous access, whether someone's in the office or remote, and it creates a very high performance, highly secure, affordable environment. Your file servers become services, obviously email and communications. We don't have Exchange servers anymore. We have Microsoft 365 that has email, calendars, contacts, and so much more. We integrate telephony services with those, so it's not just about email, it's about communications, messaging, video chat, video meetings, Slack channels, all of that comes into email communications as services. And additionally, now your cloud residency can include continuity and really a whole business continuity disaster recovery mechanism, right? So just like if you have all your servers on premise, you need a mechanism to restore your data if something goes wrong with the servers, and ideally a way to keep the business running if your facility becomes unavailable, right? In the cloud, you need to back up all of that data to make sure it's restored, and you need enough continuity that you can return to operations quickly and continue to run your business while your facilities or part of your environment is rebuilt. Okay, and this is where managed services really come into play. And so traditional managed services, a lot of focus around the help desk, end user support. That's a great thing. And fees then became per user and then per thing, right? So per client device, per server, per switch, per router, per printer, and oftentimes per service. It might be firewall monitoring. It could be backup and restore. I've just listed backup and restore as one example. There are many services that could be, charged on a per service basis in a managed service environment. When we talk about managed cloud services, again, we're talking about a cloud forward, a cloud first model, right? So we gain some efficiencies because if you recall, we're not talking about physical servers behind a physical firewall in a computer room anymore. We're talking about cloud-based services that are integrated. You might still have cloud-based application servers, and we're not afraid to use the term lift and shift. If you have a business application you've purchased, it's a package from a vendor or maybe something you had customized or even custom built, and that's running on a server with a database engine underneath it. That's great. That vendor may never give you a cloud version of that application, a SaaS version that is identical or has the same features. Heck, we use a desktop version of QuickBooks now. It's cloud resident, but we use a desktop license of QuickBooks because the online version doesn't have some of the features and the reporting that we use to run our business yet, right? So if you're in a situation where you've got applications that there isn't a SaaS version for, we can take the servers that you're running physically and move them into cloud-based servers in a cloud-based network and use the virtual desktop or the remote desktop technology to give you seamless, secure, high-performance access. And we'll get into the finances, right? It actually provides better value, and oftentimes lower cost is part of that value proposition, in that you're not replacing hardware, you're not buying hardware and storage capacity based on predicted use, and certainly we can extend the life of some of your existing hardware as well. I'm sort of off track here, we'll get into it. But when we look at managed cloud services and you've moved your infrastructure, you've moved your services that can be moved into that cloud forward model, right? You still have consumption based on the number of users at the domain level for things like DNS management and domain level security features, but you're also going to pay based on utilization, right? How many people are using that application server throughout the day? And if no one's using it, is ever going to use it between 1 in the morning and 5 in the morning, we can shut it down. You don't pay for it for those 4 hours a day. We've cut your consumption costs by 1/6, right? And so we can manage that way as well. And infrastructure will still see per device charges at times. More often now, we're able to provide aggregated device coverage. So here's a price for your network that's inclusive of your firewall router that has cellular failover in case of landline failure, your switches and your access points. We can bundle that into a neat number where you're not, paying inflated fees on a per device basis. And that cloud service model adds efficiencies. One of the things that we see is reduced network infrastructure. And as things move into the cloud, we see less need for buying additional switches and cable runs to everybody's workspace. Instead, it's switches to support Wi-Fi access points and to do everything by Wi-Fi. And we think about small business environments, surely your PCs and your laptops can connect to Wi-Fi. Most printers, even those several years old, connect almost by default now to Wi-Fi. And even, if a lot of small businesses now have moved to soft phones that run on the computers and people access with their headsets or their earbuds. Even if you want a physical desktop handset or you need one, those are now available and work just as reliably over Wi-Fi as they do over a physical wired connection. And performance of Wi-Fi and management of Wi-Fi has been so simplified that it creates a significant efficiency. And we see small businesses moving into new facilities, and they might, we talked with one business owner recently, 25 employees were going to be working in the office. Historically, that would have been about 60 Cat6 cable runs, 2 to each office. Then there were some printers, some wireless access points, some video conferencing equipment. They ended up running 4 wires for access points throughout their space, right? And 3 for access points and 1 for a specific piece of equipment custom to their industry that needed to be on a physical connection, right? The other efficiency we see with cloud services and managing in that direction is that you have fewer servers and more services. And I've already talked, I won't repeat myself, about moving from an email server to the service or domain management servers to identity management services. The third efficiency I mentioned briefly before is client longevity, right? So if we're moving your applications into cloud hosting and you're using VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure, something like Azure Windows Desktop to run those applications and have that secure high performance network environment, then the client you're running, the physical machine you use, only needs enough capacity to support the screen, display, and the keyboard and pointing device I/O, right? An occasional file transfer, to local printer, things of that nature. Effectively, we can add 1 to 2, sometimes 3 years of life to your existing IT equipment, where you might not have machines that can be upgraded or have enough memory to run current operating systems and current desktop versions of software. We can provide those. We can provide that capacity in the virtual environment at minimal incremental cost, and the machine on your desktop doesn't need to be replaced. It'll run just fine because the capability you do have is focused on the user interface, not on the actual consumption of resources and core processing. So when we look at managed cloud services, we know that it can't be as much as we'd love it to be. It's not one size fits all. So we define 4 different service tiers. And for us, you start with the essential service tier. And again, here, the focus, just as with traditional MSPs, is on that service function. So we don't talk about support and help desk. We talk about premium services, which is unlimited. And it's not just the support and answering questions for you and your employees. It's co-management of your IT services, and it's administering all the cloud services that are being offered. So it's license management, onboarding, offboarding, user training, configuration, performance monitoring and management, security security configuration and management. All of that comes into play. And with that, we see 2 essential services that every business should have. One is advanced threat protection. That's advanced protection against phishing attacks, malware, ransomware that comes in by email. That's the majority vector for new attacks still today against small businesses. And so this is protection against the most common form of cyber attack hitting SMBs today. And the third piece of this essential puzzle is the second thing we think is most important to have is backup and recovery. That Microsoft and Google both work on a shared responsibility model. They're responsible for the environment, the systems, the applications, the ability to store data. You're responsible for the safety, storage, permissions management, and overall safety of your data stored in their systems. And so just as you would never spin up a large critical file server in your office without backing it up, you shouldn't be putting files in SharePoint or OneDrive or MyDrive or shared drives without being able to having those backed up in recovery. The beautiful thing about backup and recovery for these platforms is it's not just your files, it's email messaging, it's calendar appointments, it's your contacts, it's a whole slew of the structured and unstructured data within. Add to that, and you get our basic tier. That's where we bring in the next gen endpoint protection, protecting your computers, your laptops, your desktops from local malware downloads, and next gen because it's looking at heuristics and behavioral analysis and not just profiles of what known viruses look like. It can detect the unknown and the new. Multi-factor authentication, Microsoft estimates that 92% of cyber attacks could be prevented from being effectual with multi-factor authentication, where even if a cyber thief or cyber attacker has your identity information, if you have 2-factor authentication, their ability to use that information to actually gain entry to the system is severely restricted. Data should be encrypted, not just while it's in motion at rest. Will help you manage your local disk encryption without getting yourself into trouble there, and will remotely monitor and manage your on-premise environment as well as your end user devices for problems, making sure that patches and updates are happening as appropriate, and giving us a little bit of remote control when you open a service ticket, so that if we have to force a reboot or updates or make some minor configuration changes, we have the ability to do that as well. And that remote monitoring gives us the heads up and even some prediction as when things may go wrong. We can also identify hardware problems or performance issues that we can address before they actually start disrupting the business. And in many senses, value proposition-wise, the basic tier is the most popular tier among our customers. And here there's actually a mistake in the slide. Our best value is the business tier. I forgot to slide that over after I gussied up the little graphic there, which is our basic plan. Plus, we're starting to provide managed domain name services, as well as DNS and web protection, security awareness training for you and your team so they can recognize and understand the risks and adjust their behavior to prevent attacks or stop attacks in their tracks. We'll monitor your cloud services for availability and security, and we'll, as part of our management of DNS and enhancing protocols, we'll include DMARC services. DMARC is an advanced protocol for DNS that really prevents business email compromise attacks. And so whereas ransomware and phishing attacks are the most common forms of cyber attack against small business, business email compromise is the most expensive attack when it's successful. Managed DMARC services is the best way to prevent those types of attacks. And so at the business tier, we've protected you from not only the most common, but the most damaging types of attacks from a cost perspective. And then we build in Google Workspace or M3, Microsoft 365, what's known as SaaS Ops automation. This is where we can automate setup. So we can identify roles within your company, applications and services people should have when you hire someone, bring someone on board. They're onboarded, they're automatically assigned those. If someone leaves, there's an offboarding process that's documented, automated, and repeatable. We can do dynamic group membership to manage permissions and access to applications and data. It overall provides a higher level of security and operational professionalism within your environment. To that business level, you can add we can add third-party archiving for Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace, so that you can archive former employees' accounts, still search and restore information at a much lower cost than doing natively within Google Workspace or Microsoft 365, as well as comprehensive mobile device management. And so with those 4 tiers, we can match budget and capability to your business needs, making sure those essential services are covered and you step up to where your business needs as well. And at any tier, we can add specific capabilities. So, for example, if you're a small medical practice or office, while I would argue that the business tier is best for you from a security standpoint, if you wanted to go with basic, you could. We might add email level encryption to make sure that PHI or PII isn't accidentally transmitted by email, knowing that your staff at some point is going to communicate with insurers and underwriters and things of that nature. So let's talk about traditional pricing models. Traditional MSPs, as we mentioned earlier, still have that focus of on-premise, using some cloud services, more of that core cloud model than a cloud forward model. And in our area of the country in the Northeast, on a per user basis, that's going to run you between $160 and $185 per month. And that gets you management of their primary end user device, end user support, patching, imaging of systems, things of that nature. On top of that, for your servers, firewalls, and routers, those tend to run $400 to $500 a month. Switches and access points can be $100 to $200 a month each. And backup and recovery, sort of a benchmark price in the Northeast, all in, right, is about 50 cents per gigabyte per month, assuming an on-site copy and an off-site copy as well. So if you're backing up 200 gig, that's $100 a month. And put that there for comparison. When we look at managed cloud services, what we're charging for and how we're charging is different. Now, because we're focused and we work to maximize the use of the capabilities of the productivity suites, and we've eliminated many, if not most, of your servers, yes, you have your productivity licensing. So whatever tier and license mix you have of Google Workspace or Microsoft 365. That gets you your identity management, your email, your contacts, your calendar, multiple tiers of file services, personal and shared, as well as core security services. That's great. That license price passes, the vendor says it's X, we charge you X, and there you go. Our services click in with the managed cloud services, the 4 tiers, starts at a range of 45 to 75 per user per month. That will decline based on quantity of users. We have a scale where there, volume, there's some cost efficiencies that we can pass through to you. Firewalls and routers, again, we deploy network infrastructure technology that's designed to be cloud managed and remotely managed, that's designed to minimize, if not eliminate, the need for on-premise, even to the point that if a switch has a problem, you receive a switch in the mail, pre-configured, you unplug the switch that's here, you plug in the switch that came in the same way that the original one was plugged. If you can plug in a lamp, you can replace the switch. We can do it at a lower cost, pretty much half of what a traditional MSP would do. Similar savings on switches and access points. When we look at backup and recovery, when we look at it for Google Workspace and for Microsoft 365, all of the data in those environments can be backed up for continuity and recovery for about $3 per user per month. And when we look at even devices like end user devices that might hold critical data or need a continuity solution, so that if your CEO's laptop crashes, they can be up and running in minutes until you get that and have a way to run until you get that laptop replaced. Rather than saying, oh, we'll back up to 200 gigs for $100 a month, or even $50 a month if we're going to discount it heavily. For $40 a month per PC, we can back up to a terabyte of data and provide that image available to be spun up in a cloud environment or on another piece of hardware as an interim solution till the device is recovered at the hardware level or the operating software level, whatever's wrong with it. And so the pricing model, it has some parallels as far as per user, per device, as we've talked about, but more importantly, it takes advantage of the efficiencies we've discussed and can come in at a lower cost. So here, what's the call to action? As we always start out, with the assessment, right? What's your environment? What are your needs? Talk to us about goals and objectives for your business and where your IT is working and not working for that. The environment you expect to work in, how much on-premise, how much remote or hybrid, all comes into play now. It really is, are you ready for change? And if so, what should or should not change? What can and cannot change? And let's have those boundaries defined. With that, you sort of know what you want to do, what you can do, what you need to do. We can help you define your value proposition. Let's take a holistic view of your IT services. What are you doing? How is it running? How is it managed? And how do all the pieces come together? Are there any gaps that we need to fill in? Are you overspending or have duplicate services? And with that, we can come up, with a solution and cost and really look at the value proposition of making those changes. And of course, we always suggest you look at the cost of inaction. Well, what if you don't do something? And we've had companies that said, for the amount of money it's going to take, we're not going to enhance our business continuity solution. And that's great, until you get hit. And this one company got hit twice and ended up incurring huge costs. So where the cost of action, as an example, might have been $20,000, getting hit with ransomware and not having a significant enough continuity and recovery solution in place cost them almost $200,000 to recover, right? And so the cost of inaction was huge compared to the cost of action. So we always like to look at that comparison, and not just out of fear and doom, but out of practicality as well. And then it's really plan that solution, within the bounds of budget and timing and other objectives and initiatives within your company. But plan the solution that's going to spark your business. And here's the play on words, right? Provide the security, the performance, the availability, the reliability, and the costs and cost management that we've talked about throughout the session today. And of course, once you have the plan, it doesn't do any good unless you execute. Excuse me. So at that point, I've been rambling on for about 40 minutes now, so I want to open up to questions. So feel free to open that questions window along the top or right-hand side of the screen. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time. Additionally, if you want to think about it or want to follow up, or your question is someone you feel your question is somewhat unique to your environment, you can contact us, info@cumulusglobal.com. We also have a bit.ly address that you can use to schedule an intro call. This will set up a short 15 to 20-minute phone call with one of our cloud advisors. You pick and book a time that's convenient for you and your schedule. You're also welcome to contact me directly, Falcon@cumulusglobal.com. My phone number's there too, but as I say pretty much every month, I'm not good about answering the phone if I'm busy, and I'm horrible about checking and responding to voicemail. If you want to get in touch with me, send an email. I don't have an assistant. I read all my email, I'll get back to you as quick as I can. If I'm going to be delayed, I'll delegate off and have one of my team members get back to you quickly. And so on that note, I want to thank everyone for joining us here this afternoon. I hope this provided some historical and current context about managing IT services and managing it all, talking about the shift in our computing environments, and as we move to a cloud-forward model, the types of managed services you need, your cost structure, how it should change, as well as looking at how we approach it at various tiers of service, from the minimal essentials up to the premium tier of services, and that we can provide that consultation to determine which is best for you. And again, our top tiers, is not our most popular, and certainly when we look at the value proposition, more customers see our business tier as the best value, and really that premium tier is to meet specific needs for a company or companies within specific industries. And so we're happy to help with that. On that note, I want to thank everyone for joining us here today. As always, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day and week to watch this live or to watch this on demand. So thank you, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future. Please join us again next month as well. Thank you. Have a great day.